some candid photos. There we go. Got Frank in there. Oh, look at that. Glorious. Okay, now you're a tiger. Yes.
Do it.
My permission, Todd? have you made sure that you got it all done? You don't have to go anymore.
I'm green through and I took some.
That's what I tell my kids. On the road. a joke to tell Tom.
is what we started.
Are you guys waiting for something? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so happy to see each and every one of you here today. Bienvenue aux Chambres de Communes. My name is Chris Dontermine. I'm the Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons. As you can understand, things are always on time here at the House of Commons. But I just wanted to make sure that you knew that we were about 5 minutes out from our guest speaker to be coming to address Parliament. So if we can just wait just a couple more minutes to make sure that the party can make it in with of course, the Right Honourable Prime Minister and the Speaker of the House of the Commons and the Speaker of the Senate. And I'm going to ask each and every one of you, si possible, quand que le discours est fini, je veux que tout le monde, when the speech is done, if I can ask each and every one of you to stay in your seats. There'll be a few people that do need to leave with the delegation, so we're going to try to let them move out, but most of you, I want you to stay here until I come and tell you it's time to leave, because we don't want to congest, because once the halls start to get busy, it makes it difficult for the official delegation to actually get out of the premises or out of the precinct. So if I can ask you to do, I'll come back up at the end of the speech to sort of direct the airplane if you want that folks can do. So again, merci beaucoup pour être venu to, of course, the members of Parliament, to our senators. It's always good to see you. We have a number of special guests that are here today. And I just wanted to welcome each and every one of you here once again. Bon après-midi. I will see you at the end of the speech. And I'm sure you will all be very happy with, of course, the address from President Zelensky. Merci beaucoup. Enjoy.
Glory to Ukraine.
Your Excellency, Prime Minister, President Gagné, party leaders, honorable parliamentarians, distinguished guests, bienvenue à cet événement extraordinaire, la deuxième adresse conjointe au Parlement de Son Excellence M. Volodymyr Zelensky, Président de l'Ukraine. On behalf of my colleagues, we are honored for your visit. As we come together under one roof, we take a moment to celebrate the friendship and shared values of our countries. We celebrate our people and the history of cooperation between Canada and Ukraine. And we celebrate solidarity. Permettez-moi maintenant d'inviter le très honorable Premier ministre à prendre la parole.
Mr. Speaker, parliamentarians, honored guests, friends, we gather today at a pivotal point in history. This is a time of incredible uncertainty. Attacks upon the rules-based international order threaten to upend the peace and prosperity that have been the bedrock of Canada's success. This is a challenge on a generational scale, a challenge that history will judge us on. A challenge we must confront with lion-hearted courage, and the world can find no better inspiration than our friend here with us in our house today, President Volodymyr Zelensky, and his wife, the First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelensky. 1 year, 6 months, and 29 days ago, Vladimir Putin launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, unleashing a campaign of violence and brutality that has left countless dead and forced millions to flee. But for 1 year, 6 months, and 29 days, the people of Ukraine have defended their homes, their language, and their freedom to choose their own future. They have fought back with a courage that has inspired the world, and they have been led by President Zelensky, a great champion of democracy. Monsieur le Président Zelensky.
President Zelensky, in March of last year, you addressed our parliament virtually. In June of this year, I addressed your parliament in Kyiv, the Verkhovna Rada, where I was touched to see so many Canadian flags in the chamber. Today, you are able to be here in person to speak about the fight for your democracy and your freedom. And you do it to remind us that in your country, Russia continues its assault and Ukrainians are sacrificing their lives.
Monsieur le Président Zelensky.
President Zelensky, we speak regularly. We've spoken about what is happening at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station and the environmental destruction caused by Russia's tactics. We've spoken of the human toll, children kidnapped, and people who are being taught to hate.
I've seen Putin's destructive evil firsthand during my visits to Ukraine since the war began. I saw it in the bombed-out neighborhoods, in the bridges reduced to twisted steel, in the abandoned homes. I also saw it in the faces of your citizens. They walked down the street, sat in cafes, daily life seemingly persisting, but with everyone I spoke to, I saw in the backs of their eyes the weight of this war, the fear for their fellow Ukrainians on the front lines, the anxiety that another air raid siren would go off at any moment, the loss of a loved one. The toll of this war on the mental health and well-being of Ukrainians is immeasurable. I know, First Lady Zelensky, you are dedicated to the work to address this. So today we are funding providing funding to support mental health care in Ukraine as we continue to applaud your tremendous leadership in these difficult times. When rules-based orders crumble, so much is lost. One example of how this breakdown manifests is the horrifying, preventable hardship as Russia blocks grain exports, worsening hunger and starvation among the world's most vulnerable people. President Zelensky, you and the Ukrainian people are holding the rules-based order in the balance. You are on the front lines, not just of the fight for Ukraine, but in the fight for the kind of future we are all going to be living in.
Rules matter. Following the Second World War, the bloodiest and deadliest conflict humanity has ever known, the whole world's nations agreed on a common set of rules and principles to re-establish peace. For 3/4 of a century, these rules have allowed historic prosperity. They have fostered trade, given citizens the necessary confidence to invest in their future, and helped millions of people escape poverty. There isn't a single place that hasn't known prosperity thanks to peace.
But what Putin has done is a break with civilization. It is a violation of our common humanity. It is an attempt to disassemble the rules-based order that protects our freedom. It is a move to weaken democracy and assert autocracy. Putin governs with deception, violence, and repression. He imprisons his own people and stirs up ugly sentiments of xenophobia and racism. But his imperial delusions in Ukraine have been met with a fierce defense. A defense that is not just strong because of the support from friends around the world, but because those who fight for their freedom will always fight with their whole hearts. C'est pourquoi
That is why we must all fight by all possible means. We must speak out loud and clear against violations of national sovereignty and affronts to international law. Violations to the rules-based international order must be denounced, and aggressors must be held responsible for their actions. That has always been our government's position. That is why, without exception, we oppose authoritarian states and we stand by those who defend international law, universal human rights, and the ability of all peoples to decide on their own future. That is why we remained faithful to our principles when Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor were arbitrarily detained by China.
there are countries that are bending or breaking the rules, political forces that are pandering to demagoguery. And we are all experiencing a rise of disinformation, some state-sponsored, some politically motivated, that twists facts and refuses evidence and science. In this era of uncertainty and of resurgent great power competition, rules are what will protect us. And it's not enough for them to just be written down somewhere. We must advocate for them, stand up for them, and live by them. History will judge us on how we defend democratic values. And Ukraine is at the tip of the spear in this great challenge of the 21st century. That's why Canada and Canadians are there for Ukraine and why we stand so unequivocally against Russia. It's why people across Canada have welcomed with open arms over 175,000 Ukrainians, some of whom are here with us today. those here who've come from Bucha and Kharkiv. They are part of a group of Ukrainian scientists who found safety in Canada, and their expertise in the clean economy is helping the world unwind its dependence on the fossil fuels weaponized by despots like Putin. We also have leaders from the Ukrainian Canadian community like Orisia and others. They come from the Canadian prairies, where so many Ukrainian immigrants have settled for over a century, and they have led the charge in helping their communities welcome refugees fleeing Putin's bombs, everything from collecting clothing donations to helping them find homes. We're also joined by Agnes and Susan, who lost their brother Anthony, a humanitarian volunteer, just 12 days ago. He was killed in a Russian strike while trying to help civilians in Donetsk Oblast, innocent people who are being brutalized by the Kremlin's unprovoked aggression. Today, our gallery is filled with Ukrainians who've come to show their support and gratitude for you, Volodymyr, but I think we all need to take a moment to thank them for their bravery, their generosity, and their solidarity with the values of democracy.
President Zelensky, I have clearly said that our government will stand by you for as long as it takes. Canada has provided nearly $9 billion in military, financial, and humanitarian support to Ukraine since Putin began his war of aggression.
We are making a longer-term, multi-year commitment that provides predictable, steady support to Ukraine. It will include $650 million over 3 years for 50 armored vehicles, including medical evacuation vehicles that will be built by Canadian workers in London, Ontario. We'll also send F-16 trainers for pilots and for maintenance so Ukrainians are able to maximize their use of donated fighter jets.
We will continue to work with our partners, including within NATO, to provide unwavering support, and we will continue to provide economic support to Ukraine over the next year so that it remains a strong, dynamic, and prosperous democratic country. But our greatest hope is that you won't need military or financial support for long, and that peace returns soon. But it cannot be a false peace based on a compromise imposed by the aggressor. For a lasting peace, we must oppose Putin and reject his attempts to bring us back to a time when might made right. A lasting peace must clearly establish that borders must be respected, regardless of the size of the neighboring army. This peace must restore the right of Ukrainians to determine their own future.
Canada stands with the principles of Ukraine's peace formula. We believe that peace must respect the UN Charter, be based in international law, and preserve Ukraine's territorial integrity. This is the peace we must fight for, and that is what Ukraine has done for 1 year, 6 months, and 29 days. Putin thought he'd make quick work of marching on Kyiv. Putin thought President Zelensky would cave in the face of personal peril. But, sir, you have not. You have galvanized the world. You have made the bonds between democratic allies and friends stronger than ever. Volodymyr, Olena, to see you here today in this chamber, to see so many proud and courageous Ukrainians here today, after everything you have all endured, is a testament to the commitment of your country and the strength of your fight. Monsieur le Président Zelensky.
President Zelensky, you have shown the rest of the world true leadership, even in the most difficult moments. You fight with a sense of hope, and you are dedicated to the security and progress of your people.
In times like this, the world needs leaders who understand that true strength is not about wielding power, but about empowering others. True strength is not about crushing your opponent with brute force and lies. It's about respecting the humanity and the dignity of everyone. It's about governing from a basis of truth and compassion. In times of crisis, holding fast to positive values like this can be a lot harder than resorting to fear and resentment, but it is well worth it. When the history books are written, we know what they will say of you. That you were among those who stood up for their principles, no matter how hard. Among those who stood up to bullies. Among those who protected the less fortunate. Among those who unified people in the face of fear. Among those who defended the rules and upheld the law. Among those who put justice, hope, and freedom above all else. We know that democracy is one of the greatest expressions of freedom. It gives us the right to have a voice, to choose our own future, to be protected by a system with justice and accountability. But democracy does not happen by accident, and it will not continue without effort. We must defend it and strengthen it with all that we have. Volodymyr, my friend, you have a unique understanding of this. You stare down Putin every single day. And we will be with you and all heroes of this courageous fight for as long as it takes. Slava Ukraini!
Glory to Ukraine!
Mr. Speaker, it is now my distinct honor to welcome President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine to address this House.
Thank you so much. Героям слава. Героям слава.
Glory to heroes.
Thank you so much. Dear ladies and gentlemen, Canada, before I start, I just want to remind one thing. This thing is very important to understand both Ukraine and Canada, and what we are up to, what we need to do, and to do together. 1983, the city of Edmonton. Its history is closely linked to the destiny of Ukraine and Ukrainian Canadian community. That here in Edmonton, the first monument to the victims of Holodomor was built in the world. Thank you so much. Thank you. Was built to remember the genocide against the Ukrainian people, the genocide ordered and perpetrated by Moscow, the first ever Holodomor monument in the world. At that time, Ukraine didn't yet have memorials commemorating the victims of genocide of Ukrainians, because Ukraine was under Moscow's control back then.
This fall will mark the 40th anniversary since that first and very important commemoration of the victims of Holodomor. A lot has changed since then. Ukraine gained independence. Ukraine is restoring its own historic memory. Dozens of other countries, their parliaments, their governments have already recognized Holodomor as the genocide of the Ukrainian people. And this year alone, there have been 11 of such recognitions. And I'm sure that the whole world, will recognize the truth about Holodomor. But there is something that has not changed either in 40 years since the monument in Edmonton was built or in 90 years since the Holodomor. Moscow now, as always, is bent on controlling Ukraine and makes use of all available means to do that, including genocide. It is genocide what Russian occupiers are doing to Ukraine. And when we want to win, when we call on the world to support us, it is not just about an ordinary conflict. It is about saving lives of millions of people. Literally, physical salvation. Ordinary women and men, children, our families, whole communities, entire cities. Russia's destruction of Mariupol, of Volnovakha, or Bakhmut, or any other city or village in Ukraine must not go unpunished. Life and justice must prevail everywhere in Ukraine and for all Ukrainians. This Russian aggression must end with our victory. Yes. Yes. So that Russia will never bring back genocide to Ukraine and will never ever try to do so. Moscow must lose once and for all, and it will lose. Dear speakers, the whole Parliament of Canada, dear Justin, Mr. Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen of the government, dear representatives of all the communities and cities, all citizens of Canada. In my opinion, one of the most startling qualities of your country is that justice is not an empty word for Canada. Another extremely important fact about you is that you never ever make a political bet on hatred and enmity. And you are always on the bright side of history. Thank you. That's to you. During the First World War and in the time between those terrible wars, and during the Second World War, and during the Cold War, you always defended freedom. You have always defended justice. And I had no doubt that you would choose the side of freedom and justice when Russia launched a full-scale war against Ukraine. Thank you. But it is never enough only to choose the right side. You also need to be able to be a leader on the side, and you do. You are a leader, and I thank you for that, Canada. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for your political support for Ukraine. And this is truly support of a leader. And it is global in scale. Because when you are fighting for something, when you are fighting for good, in human nature, the false neutrality looks obviously immoral. When one sees true leaders, all others who are afraid to be real, to speak out, to fight, have only two opinions: to change or to be looked down. And I thank you, Canada, for being a real example of leadership and honesty for so many around the world, an example that inspires others to defend life. Canada's support for Ukraine with weapons and equipment has allowed us to save thousands of lives. This includes air defense systems, armored vehicles, artillery shells, and very significant assistance in demining. Thank you so much. Canada's leadership in sanctions against Russia for this war and terror really encouraged others in the world to follow your lead. And I'm especially grateful for your extremely strong 100% leadership support of the Ukrainian movement to NATO. For your strong participation in training our soldiers. It's very important. It's already a tradition that Canada trains those who defend the world. Thousands. Yes. Thousands and thousands of pilots during the Second World War, thousands of Ukrainians now, and this is what makes victory strong, victory indispensable, training. Thank you for this. Thank you for your economic support, for helping Ukraine to get rid of its dependence on Russian nuclear fuel. And this is progress, not only for us, really, Ukraine and Canada together with their partners and really friends are demonstrating to everyone that it is quite realistic to completely cut off our ties with dubious Russian nuclear technologies, in addition to be purely technological danger. The Russian nuclear industry also serves Moscow's political expansion. Russia uses nuclear technology and construction of nuclear power plants like gas and oil for political attacks against the sovereignty of other nations. Russia is trying to break the sovereignty of others through its manipulation of energy resources, all energy resources. So the more nations are free from Russian energy resources, the sooner energy in the world will once again become just an energy resource. Not a weapon. Not a weapon against sovereignties. Another important area of our cooperation, literally justice. Today, in talks with Prime Minister Justin, we discussed the Canadian initiative for the G7 to set up efforts to confiscate Russian assets. Those funds that Russia and its henchmen used to pay for their war should be used to fairly compensate for the damage caused by war and terror. Active and global work is also required to bring Russia to justice for the crime of aggression itself and for absolutely all crimes from this aggression. All deaths, every deportation of every child, every adult, every life needs to be protected. And every attacked nation needs justice to rule. The world needs it too, so that other potential aggressors can see that war ends in verdicts for the aggressor. And I urge you, Canada, to extend your ability to lead to other countries, especially in this matter of justice, of prosecuting the aggression, of compensation for aggression, of making the aggressor feel how strong justice is. And most of all, I would like to thank you, Canada, for the purely human thing, for making Ukrainians feel at home when they are here in Canada. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And this is, you know, this is not just a legacy of history, this is a legacy of character. The Ukrainian Canadian community is about millions of Ukrainian destinies that have become the destiny of Canada with all its diversity of communities. Freedom, loving, courage, our special inner call for justice. The ability of our people to share comfort wherever they go, to build and create, not to ruin or humiliate. Ukrainian flags in Canada are a part of everyday life as absolute trust to Canada in Ukraine. In fact, such proximity provides many answers, including answers to the question about this war. Can we give up? No. Can we betray the good in human nature? No. Can we agree to evil? No. Can we allow our identity to be erased? No. Ukraine and Canada are the same. We stand and we fight for life. Ukraine, not genocide, will be victorious in this war. People will be the winners, not the Kremlin. Freedom will be the winner. Justice will be the winner. You can know this for sure about us, because you know for sure about yourself that you would never submit to evil. Je te remercie, Canada.
Thank you, Canada.
And may one day soon a monument be built in maybe Edmonton. As in other cities of the world and in the cities of Ukraine, to honor the victory of our people in this war. Our common victory with you, the people of Canada, with all your communities, with all your legacy of good. Ladies and gentlemen, today me and my beautiful First Lady really had the honor of meeting with the Governor General of Canada, Honorable Mary Simon, and she taught me a word from her mother tongue. Ayuinata. Ayuinata. She said the meaning of this word is don't give up. Don't give up, stay strong against all odds. And so shall it be. Ayuinata, Canada. Ayuinata, Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you, Mr. President.
I now invite the Honorable Raymond Gagné, Speaker of the Senate, to take the floor.
Monsieur
President, Ms. Zelenskyy, Prime Minister Trudeau, Speaker Rota, dear parliamentarians, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, it is a great honor and a real privilege for me to thank you for your very powerful and very inspiring words. We are all honored by your presence. The last time you addressed this Parliament, just a few weeks after Russia's full-scale assault on your country, you implored us to imagine what the Ukrainian people were feeling, to imagine what it's like to be bombed and invaded without provocation, to imagine what it feels like to understand the meaning of the invasion, that Russia was not only attacking Ukrainian territory, but also its very sovereignty. Mr. President, I can say without hesitation that we have heard you. Your words have echoed in the chambers of our Parliament, in our committee rooms and offices, and all across our great country.
Shortly after I became Speaker of the Senate of Canada, I was asked about the importance of role models, and I expressed my belief that if you see it, you can be it. Mr. President, a new generation is seeing you. Having worked with young people in the field of education for over 35 years, and as a mother of 2 male adult children, I am heartened by the model you are showing. around the world are seeing that a democratically elected voice is the real form of power.
Mr. President, for more than 18 months, you have been the epitome of the people's mobilization and a source of inspiration for the world. Whether you were speaking from a bunker or behind a podium, in a meeting room or on the front line, you never gave up. You never gave up, wavered, or hesitated, embodying the spirit and resilience of the Ukrainian people. I'm certainly not the first to mention it, but who could forget February 25th, 2022? You were in the center of Kyiv, the target of the Russian invader. It was one of the most perilous and uncertain moments of the war, and you had one strong message to convey: we are here.
Your people have carried forward this resolve at Hostomel, at Kharkiv, and beyond. While we draw inspiration from their stories, we also recognize the realities Ukrainians have faced. Withstanding thousands of artillery rounds every day, grieving the unrelenting loss of family, loved ones, colleagues, and neighbors, patiently working through treacherous minefields while drones circle overhead, defending against waves of attacks on civilian infrastructure, and taking steps where and when they can to recover and rebuild. Mr. President, your people's resilience in the face of such aggression compels the international community, in your now famous words, to be here for Ukraine, however long it takes. And our message today, which you can bring back to your people, is equally clear. The Canadian people stand with Ukraine. We aren't going anywhere.
On behalf of all senators, of all members of the House of Commons, and, no doubt, of all Canadians, I thank you once again for your courage and your determination, and for your inspiring words to Canadians and to the entire world today.
Slava Ukraini!
Glory to Ukraine!
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Monsieur le Premier Ministre.
Mr. Prime Minister.
Mr. President, as has been noted today, you join a very small group of world leaders who have addressed a joint session of our Parliament for a second time. Among those leaders, one stands out for his oratory, his leadership in the face of adversity, and his strong determination to fight on behalf of his people and on behalf of what is right. That leader was the late African president and Nobel Peace Prize winner, Nelson Mandela. In his first address to the joint session of our Parliament, Nelson Mandela said of the Canadian people, and I quote, "They are like us, like brothers and sisters, from whose warm embrace we shall never be parted." Mr. President, I want you to know that we feel like that still with Ukraine. Je suis convaincu.
I'm confident that you'll share the same conviction after your visit today, Mr. President. Indeed, beyond metaphor, the ties between Canada and Ukraine are above all family ties, ties between our two peoples strengthened by the Ukrainian-Canadian community, which totals 1.3 million people.
Your words today also remind us of another world leader who addressed both our houses during the time of war. In December 1941, during World War II, the British Prime Minister, Sir Winston Churchill, traveled to Ottawa and delivered an impassioned speech on behalf of his people to rally for the continued support for his country at war. It was a defining moment of history and one that must never be forgotten. We have here in the chamber today Ukrainian-Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98. His name is Yaroslav Hunka. And I was going to say he's in the gallery, but I think you beat me to that. But I'm very proud to say that he is from North Bay and from my riding of Nipissing-Témiscamingue. He's a Ukrainian hero, a Canadian hero, and we thank him for all his service. Thank you.
At a time when freedom is regressing in many parts of the world and autocrats are supporting each other, Ukraine's resistance has rallied democracies and spurred us to action.
Resistance often starts at the top. When you, Mr. President, with you, Mr. President, but also with the Verkhovna Rada, where the business of Parliament, the people's business, has never stopped. I know that parliamentarians in this chamber have marveled at the courage and determination of our counterparts. Ukrainian legislators have pursued their critical work despite the continued warning of missiles and drones, despite the threat to well-being of their families and homes, and despite the overwhelming challenges of recovery and rebuilding. Throughout this terrible war, I have had the great privilege of developing a great friendship with my counterpart, the Speaker of the Verkhovna Rada, Chairman Stefanchuk. Like you, Mr. President, he advocates for his country with passion and with poise. And like you, he has conveyed what is at stake: Ukraine's freedom, but also preservation of the rules-based international order, which is a fundamental part of the future of the democratic world. Most recently, we spoke at the G7 Speakers Summit in Japan. At that time, he shared with me a drawing from a young Ukrainian girl who thanked Canada for our support and our shared wish that all Ukrainian children should live under peaceful skies. It moved me to tears, and it moves me there again. sont des moments.
It is moments like these, bonds like these, that remind us that we must all stand with Ukraine in the face of the threat to its sovereignty.
Mr. President, Canada has stood with Ukraine people throughout its proud history, and that will not change. We will continue to stand for justice and peaceful skies over Ukraine. Thank you once again for addressing our Parliament. Slava Ukraini!
Glory to Ukraine.
Thank you. Very nice.
Дякую.
Thank you. Now, if I can just have your attention just for a few moments. We know we have some of the delegation that are going to have to leave, so we'll allow them to go first. And maybe some of our media friends and photographers and all those fun things. But if all of us could maybe just have a seat, speak amongst yourselves, talk about how great a speech that was from our friend President Zelensky. So I will come back in about 3 minutes to be able to tell you. Venir dans take 3 minutes.
I'll be back in about 3 minutes to tell you that you may now leave.
And chat amongst yourselves. We could have question period if anyone was interested. Yeah? Why? All right. The Honourable Member for New Westminster, Burnaby. I am still seeing a few people trying to leave. I'm going to name you. No, I'm kidding. But please, if you're just going to the lobbies, that's okay. But just stay here for a few more minutes. Si vous pouvez rester pour quelques d'autres minutes pour faire sûr que nos amis peuvent quitter la colline dans une façon assez facilement. Facilement, c'est un bon mot, hein?
Test, test, test. 1, 2, 1, 2. Test. Good. Test 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Testing. Test 1, 2. Check.
Oh, la fois, elle aussi. the last communication, do you want Nancy to say the first part of the script right now?
Your Excellencies and distinguished guests, Vos Excellences et distingués invités, we will soon witness the signing of the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. The signatory for Canada is the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, and the signatory for Ukraine is His Excellency Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine.
We will soon be witnessing the signing of the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. The signatory for Canada is the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, and the signatory for Ukraine is His Excellency Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine.
Please welcome the Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, and the President of Ukraine, His Excellency Volodymyr Zelensky. Veuillez accueillir.
Please welcome the Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, and the President of Ukraine, His Excellency Volodymyr Zelensky.
The signing is the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement.
The signing is the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement.
I now invite Mr. Ihor Sirota, Director General of Ukrenergo, and Mr. John M. Beck, Chairman of the Aecon Group Incorporated, to take their seats at the signing table.
I now invite Mr. Ihor Sirota, Director General of Ukrenergo, and Mr. John M. Beck, Chairman of the Aecon Group Incorporated, to take their seats at the signing table.
Mr. Ihor Sirota and Mr. John M. Beck will now sign the Memorandum of Collaboration between private joint stock company Ukrenergo and Aecon Construction Global Services Incorporated on collaboration in the construction of a hydropower plant in Ukraine. Mr. Ihor
Sirota and Mr. John M. Beck will now sign the Memorandum of Collaboration between private joint stock company Ukrenergo and Aecon Construction Global Services Incorporated on collaboration in the construction of a hydropower plant in Ukraine.
Thank you. This concludes the official signing ceremony. Merci.
Thank you. This concludes the official signing ceremony.
Good afternoon. Bonjour. It is Canada's great honor to have President Zelensky visit us here today. Thank you for coming, Volodymyr. We stand here absolutely united in our defense of democracy and our condemnation of Vladimir Putin's unprovoked, unjustified, and unconscionable invasion of Ukraine.
I've discussed in person today with President Zelensky during our tete-a-tete. We've also had a cabinet meeting. We discussed military needs, financial needs, and humanitarian needs for Ukraine today and for the future.
At each meeting, Canada was clear, as we always are, that we will stand with Ukraine with whatever it takes for as long as it takes. And today, we're backing up this commitment with further support. We are shifting our approach to provide multi-year assistance, ensuring Ukraine has the predictable support it needs for long-term success. As part of this approach, I'm announcing $650 million in new military assistance over the next 3 years to supply Ukraine with 50 armored vehicles, including armored medical evacuation vehicles that will be built by Canadian workers in London, Ontario. We will also contribute pilot and maintenance instructors to the Joint Coalition F-16, as well as support for Leopard 2 tank maintenance. We
will also provide Ukraine with 35 drones equipped with high-resolution cameras and support services, as well as light vehicles and ammunition based on NATO standards. Earlier this week, Minister Blair confirmed that Canada will provide a financial contribution to the consortium led by the United Kingdom to deliver air defense equipment to Ukraine.
Ukraine's resilience to date has been remarkable, but their economy continues to need support so that it can withstand this invasion, so that government has the resources it needs to continue to provide services to its people, so that it has the long-term certainty to plan and coordinate assistance effectively, and so that when Ukraine is victorious, it will continue to be a strong and prosperous country. That is why I am today confirming that we will again provide substantial macroeconomic support to Ukraine in the 2024 fiscal year.
We've just signed a free trade agreement that supports the economic development of Ukraine and provides Canadian companies privileged access that will create jobs. And later today, I will head to Toronto with Volodymyr to meet with leaders from the business world. We will discuss how the private sector can support efforts by Ukraine and already participate in rebuilding the country.
Meanwhile, we're continuing to impose costs on Russia and ensuring that those responsible for this illegal, unjustifiable invasion do not benefit from it. First, Canada and Ukraine have agreed to engage with G7 partners to establish a working group of eminent persons who will provide advice on the seizure and forfeiture of Russian assets, including of the Russian Central Bank. Second, we're adding another 63 Russian individuals and entities to our sanctions list, including those complicit in the kidnapping of children and the spreading of disinformation. L'ensemble de la société.
All of Ukrainian society needs support. To support civil society, we will assist local NGOs and assist the Ukrainian Parliament in improving its cyber resilience. To assist communities, we are also supporting the rebuilding of local infrastructure, and we are helping farmers who have been disturbed by Putin's actions.
To preserve the memory of victims of the Holodomor, Canada is prepared to contribute to the Holodomor Museum in Ukraine once appropriate arrangements are in place. And to help all affected Ukrainians, we're providing funding to make mental health support more available, because the toll this is taking on the well-being of citizens, even those not on the front lines, can never be understated. Évidemment,
of course, it will not be possible to rebuild before peace is reestablished. As I said in Parliament today, and as I said at the UN Security Council this week, this peace must not be a false peace based on compromises that reward the aggressor. We must have lasting peace, respecting the UN Charter, respecting international law, to restore territorial integrity to Ukraine.
Powerful to hear President Zelensky speak to parliamentarians today. And this evening, he will again speak, this time directly to Canadians, including Ukrainian Canadians, at an event in Toronto. Over 1.4 million Canadians have Ukrainian roots, but this war has made all of us as Canadians connected to Ukraine. This country has seen an incredible outpouring of support that is unique in the way that it comes from all corners of society, from the diaspora, from different orders of government, from different charities, and from across the Canadian public, because your fight is our fight. These new announcements we have made build on nearly $9 billion of support since this full-scale invasion began, build on years of support through initiatives like Operation Unifier that has trained up tens of thousands of Ukrainian fighters, and a list of nearly 2,700 individuals or entities that we have sanctioned since Putin illegally occupied Crimea in 2014. Canada's support for Ukraine is unequivocal and always will be. And Volodymyr, I have to say that the steadfastness and the strength of your leadership, of your compassion, and of how you have inspired not just Ukrainians, not just Canadians, but people all around the world to look at what they can do concretely to continue to stand up for what is right, continue to stand up for our values, is an inspiration to us all, including to me, my dear friend. So thank you very much. We will continue to stand with you as long as it takes. Yes.
I thank you, Justin, my dear friend, Prime Minister, guests, members of government, Canadians, journalists. Today, I, together with my First Lady of Ukraine, together with my team, have arrived to Canada in order to personally say thank you for all the support provided to the Ukrainians. At times of war and at different other times, the people of Ukraine are receiving only respect from the Canadians, only the desire to help, only the trust. So please know that we are greatly appreciating this support, and Ukraine shall always remember that. And when we will gain victory, and we will be victorious, you have to know this is going to be our common victory with the Canada, with all the partners, with all the friends, with the whole free world. That is free because there's nations that are protecting the freedom and life with dedication. It was an honor for me to address the Parliament of Canada. I thank you. This is already my second statement, but today it was offline, like face-to-face, and we are very grateful that all the parties, all the parliament are supporting us. We had also a very fruitful meeting with the General Governor of Canada, and surely we have a very fruitful negotiations with Justin. I'm very grateful to you, and the Prime Minister, together with his strong team, has been always supporting us and assisting us. We have a very good agreements. Our defensive cooperation since the start of the full-scale aggression was very effective. Canada has provided us assistance for over 8 billion Canadian dollars. There's houses, armored vehicles, ammunition, firearms. Canada has trained over 40,000 of Ukrainian soldiers under the framework of the Unifier operation. I'd like to specially outline Canadian leadership in the humanitarian demining. This is very important for Ukrainians because around a third part of the territory of Ukraine are contaminated with the unexploded ordnance. These are the leftovers of the Russian shelling. This is an enormous amount of work that we would need to do in order to clean our territory from the mines. But I'm confident that together with the Canadian support, we shall be implementing and fulfilling those tasks. We highly appreciate the decision of the Canada to join the training program for F-16 pilots. I thank you, Justin. We have discussed in a detailed manner on the air defense. I've expressed gratitude for the procurement of additional missiles for air defense systems. This is a very timely decision, as a lot of missiles and Iranian drones are being used against our civilian infrastructure, against our people. Today we have received a new package of defense support. This was already mentioned by Justin, the armored vehicles as well as armored medical evacuation vehicles. This is something that we highly need for our wounded heroes. We have discussed our cooperation in the field of military industry and the joint production of the weaponry. We're expecting for the participation of the Ukrainian companies in the first forum of defense industries that will be held in Ukraine very soon. Then we've reinforced our economic cooperation. We have signed the renewed or updated free trade agreement. This will serve as the foundation foundation for the renovation. Canada is one of our largest donors, and very grateful for the decision to continue with the support to Ukraine. What's important is that the Canada is ready and continues with further sanctions pressure against the aggressor, so that the aggressor would not be able to fund the aggression. Then we have discussed different aspects of the peace formula. That includes justice and the accountability for the damages caused by Russia to Ukraine as the result of this aggression. I'm grateful to Canada for supporting our work on the organization of the Global Peace Formula Summit, and I'm very grateful for the leadership to work on the security guarantees for Ukraine until the joining with NATO. Our teams are working on bilateral documents of security guarantees. One other very important thing, the Ukrainian community in Canada. I'm very grateful to all of its members. I'm very grateful that the Ukrainians in Canada, Ukrainian culture in Canada are always at the same level, together with other cultures and other languages of other minorities. The equality and respect to the other communities is an important characteristic of your country. This will always stay like that. I'm very grateful. Let us have the victory as soon as possible. Let us have our common victory. Slava Ukraini! Glory to Ukraine.
Minister, President Zelensky, we will be taking 2 questions from the Canadian media, 2 questions from the Ukrainian media. Nous allons prendre 2 questions.
We will take 2 questions from Canadian media, 2 questions from the Ukrainian media. We will begin with
Anupchenko.
Mr. Prime Minister, Pane President, I got a question for both of you. You will be likely agree that the most significant way Canada can help Ukraine is to guarantee security as long as the war continues, and to help in achieving a just peace. So, Mr. Trudeau, do you already know which security guarantees Canada will be able to provide to Ukraine? And for the peace plan, which steps of President Zelensky peace formula does Canada supports? Пане Президенте, зважаючи на рівень відносин.
Mr. President, considering the level of cooperation and your personal cooperation with the Prime Minister, what are your expectations of the support of Canada to your peace formula, as well as the security guarantees for Ukraine?
Thank you very much. First of all, on the security guarantees, Canada is stepping up today to announce the kind of multi-year support that is a concrete embodiment of what we've been saying since the very beginning, which is that Canada will stand with Ukraine with whatever it takes for as long as it takes. This is not just because Canada and Ukraine are historical friends, that we have deep people-to-people ties, or even that Volodymyr and I are great friends in person. It's because this is the right thing to do. Ukraine is standing up and fighting and dying for the rules-based order that protects all of us. It is in Canadians' interests to ensure that Ukraine wins this war, that Russia does not win this war. The impacts that we're feeling, whether it's on food and grocery prices or fuel prices, have been deeply negatively impacted for families from coast to coast to coast, and indeed around the world by this war. And that's why we will continue to stand with Ukraine with whatever it takes for as long as it takes. When it comes to the peace process, we fully support the peace process. And the biggest challenge we have is understanding that we can't pick all of them to lead on. We have to pick just a few, and we're in conversations with that. One of the ones that we are very much looking at is how we can support around displaced persons and the abduction of children. That's something that Canada has, obviously, when it comes to migration and welcoming 175,000 Ukrainians and counting, an example of a place where we can show leadership on this issue around the world.
I thank you for your question. Good afternoon. First, as for the security guarantees, this is a very strong bilateral document that was mentioned at the Vilnius summit, at the G7 countries summit, and there will be a separate bilateral document with every country on security guarantees. We clearly understand what those guarantees are, because we are at war, we are at tests. So this is a security guarantees, both military and humanitarian guarantees, the reinforcement of the Ukrainian armed forces in order not to have any other attempt of any aggression by any other aggressor. Now we're talking about Russia. We are talking about the strong protection in the air and at sea. We know the areas that are usually used by the aggressor. That is the energy sector, which is also very important, and it's combined with the reinforcement of air defense. Surely you are perfectly aware of this. The protection of the energy, the protection of the infrastructure, of critical infrastructure. There's many other aspects. Then there are a number of preventive sanctions, a list of sanctions that shall be imposed against certain aggressor in case of the aggression. The teams are working, and the reason I've said about the different agreements, because you know that there are countries who can provide weapons, then there are countries who are ready to talk about the humanitarian assistance simply because they don't have a powerful armed forces or the ability to produce weaponry. That is why there will be separate agreements with separate country. That is why the G7 countries, they are top priority, because these are the powerful countries that are able to provide the strong security guarantees. As for the peace formula, the most important task is to make sure that all the peaceful negotiations would remain focused. So we are the victim and Russia is the aggressor. We are under attack. The war is in Ukraine. That is why it is absolutely fair that the format of the peace formula was offered by Ukraine, a country which is defending its independence and fighting for its life. We have suggested a number of aspects, and we are currently working on the organization of the inauguration summit. And the big task for us is to make sure there will be as many countries from different continents as possible engaged into the formula, because that would mean that Russia and its aggression is left, well, on itself, and there is a political isolation of the Russian Federation. This is very important. Then, on the basis of the first inauguration summit, our security advisors and diplomatic representatives will start working at different platforms on each point of the peace formula separately. There are countries who will be joining all the points. There are countries who are ready to support only certain points, and that is absolutely normal. For us, it is important to have as many countries as possible engaged. Then, all of these points will be submitted to the leaders of the nations.
Kevin Gallagher.
President Zelensky, did President Biden promise to send Ukraine long-range Army tactical missile systems? And for both leaders, how concerned are you about divisions in U.S. Congress and NATO allies like Poland pulling military support for Ukraine and getting Ukraine the support it needs? Prime Minister, in French and English, please, and what can Canada do in that respect with allies?
Excuse me, can you repeat the second part of your question? The first was about the weapon.
Correct.
And the United States. And the second part, can you repeat, please?
Sure, no problem. How concerned are you with divisions in U.S. Congress, with some recent divisions amongst NATO allies like Poland, in terms of getting Ukraine the military aid it needs as quickly as it needs? And I'm wondering if you think Canada can play a role to encourage allies.
Thank you. We are grateful to the United States, and with all due respect to all our allies, United States provide the largest share of assistance, and the assistance that our soldiers on the battlefield, on the front line, really need at this moment. So we are discussing all the different types of weapons, long-range weapons, and artillery shells with the caliber of 155 millimeters, then air defense systems. Therefore, we have a comprehensive discussion and the work with the United States at different levels. We have cooperation at the level of security advisors, at the level of ministers of defense, and at our level, that's a separate bilateral kind of relations at the level of presidents. I believe that the majority of what has been discussed yesterday with President Biden, I think, will be able to reach the agreements. Yes, it is a matter of time. Not everything depends on Ukraine. There's different processes, I have to say, frankly. The sooner, the less people will lose. This is the fact. As for the assistance to Ukraine, we are working with all the states. I understand that Russia, on its side, is spreading disinformation, it's spreading its narratives all around the place. It works with the societies. It's trying to influence the politicians, the public institutions, with different political parties, different NGOs, with many from different countries of the world. They are working very hard. They are investing billions into that. This is a fact. This is in order to divide the Europe, divide the United States, and divide the whole world. They have a significant influence. They keep influencing the African continent. They constantly working with Latin American countries. Well, they're spending a lot of efforts, a lot of attention, a lot of money for that. It's hard to tackle that. That is why the long war, that is why they're working long on that. Our task as Ukraine, and this is something that I would like to address to our Canadian friends and to you journalists, you are the weapons capable of uniting the society. And just as today we've talked with Justin about this, I really want the Prime Minister to help us with that. I'm confident that he can do that because Canada has powerful relationship with many countries of the world. We cannot let Russia divide the opinions in the world. They are doing that. Now, if the opinions will be divided, if the unity will be broken, this powerful unity that we've managed to acquire in the beginning of the war, then there could be no support for Ukraine. That's a fact.
As you all know, Canada has been very, very active in supporting Ukraine directly with humanitarian support, military support, financial and economic support. But we've also been very, very active on the world stage. Canada is one of the most interconnected countries in the world. Members of the G7, of the G20, the Commonwealth, the Organization of American States, of La Francophonie, of APEC, of so many different gatherings in which we have been unequivocal in standing not just up for Ukraine and encouraging others to stand alongside us, but in ensuring that people understood that this is not just a matter of a war in Eastern Europe that might not matter to people across the global south, but it is a contract that does matter around the world. Yes, because of food prices, because of energy prices, because of the geopolitical instability that Russia is creating with its illegal invasion, but also because the matter of sovereignty, of territorial integrity, of the rule of law must and does matter to all countries around the world. So Canada has been incredibly active alongside Ukraine in all the moments where Volodymyr has appeared at various summits to stand up for Ukraine and stand up for the rule of law, but also in summits like the most recent G20 where Volodymyr wasn't able to be joining us. Canada spoke clearly and strongly and worked to convene partners. We will do this because we are a country that always stands up against the rule of law. And as Volodymyr said, the propaganda, the misinformation, the disinformation that Russia is aggressively spreading throughout our democracies is something that we have to counter with facts, with values, and with the kind of strength and solidarity that will see us through these difficult times. Canada
has always been there for Ukraine. At the bilateral level, we're there with military assistance, humanitarian assistance, financial assistance, but we are also there on the world stage, standing up unequivocally for Ukraine's sovereignty, but also the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity that are essential to the proper functioning of all of our countries. We have and we will continue to be there to underline how much this conflict impacts us all. We must all stand by the UN Charter, law and order, and stability and prosperity that the world has known for 75 years, that has been broken by Russia and its illegal actions. Canada will continue to be there for Ukraine and for the rule of law.
Thank you. Next question, Maxim.
Okay, Prime Minister, Mr. President, thank you for taking the questions. So I also have a question for both of you. So for the Prime Minister, are you concerned that the recent published report by the American Department of the Treasury ranks Canada 8th in the world regarding the number of suspected Russian sanctions evasions by local companies? How can the sanctions regime be strengthened in order to deter this type of activity? And for the President, нещодавно від деяких західних партнерів.
Recently, some of the Western partners mentioned the need for running elections in Ukraine in accordance to the terms, and the Constitution prohibits the elections during the martial law period. Do you have any pressure from Canada on the need to have elections next year, and whether the Canada is ready to support that?
Countries that has stepped up the quickest and the most comprehensively on sanctioning those responsible for this illegal war, Putin and all his cronies and the people who've profited from it, whether they be in Russia or Belarus or elsewhere. We will continue. We've sanctioned about 2,700 people and entities, and we will continue to. We are constantly working to strengthen, to coordinate with our allies to make sure that these sanctions have the right impact on the people responsible for this war, while ensuring that they are not harming people in the global south who are facing food insecurity or energy insecurity. That is the role that Canada continues to play, to highlight that Russia is responsible alone for the food and energy crisis that so many people around the world are facing right now. Okay. Le Canada est parmi
Canada is one of the strongest countries in terms of sanctions against the Russians and others who are involved, who are profiting from this illegal war. We will, of course, continue to work with our allies, with our partners, to ensure that these sanctions hit as hard as possible, while ensuring that we are not hurting the most vulnerable around the world who are suffering because of this war by Russia, especially in terms of the price of food and energy.
Thank you for the question. First, Canada is not pressing, and we have a warm relationship, really. You should not press. You can raise the issue, but not press. Secondly, the team of the Prime Minister, we haven't raised the issue of elections because it's not topical issue considering the security aspects. You were right to mention that the law prohibits the elections at the time of the martial law period, but I'm ready. But the security is a very complicated aspect of running the elections. The first complexity is to have the elections in a democratic and transparent manner. For that, we need independent observers from different countries of the world. How it's usually done in Ukraine in a democratic and transparent manner, just as it was during the previous elections. Now, the second question, how to give a chance to vote for the people located on the temporarily occupied territories. I'm not talking about the territories occupied in 2014. I'm talking about those territories that were occupied after the 24th of February. Now, this is a complicated matter. We need to think of that. Then third, a lot of Ukrainians, not hundreds of thousands, but millions of Ukrainians are abroad, and how to organize the voting process for them. It's a difficult matter from the standpoint of infrastructure, and at this point, there is no answer at that. As for the funding, we are currently saying that in Ukraine, which is absolutely fair, the society is responding harsh whenever the parliament or the government is willing to, to allocate money to a certain direction, which is different from weapons. I mean, the society is not ready to support that. And the society is, in fact, is absolutely against that because we are at war. And everyone thinks, what sort of elections are you kind of thinking about? But this topic is raised, so we need to get ready, to be ready for this topic. And the last, but not the least, I think the largest complication, it's the military, because we have 1 million of soldiers. And, I mean, how they're going to vote while in the trenches, how they will be able to visit the polling stations close to the front line. So everything should be organized in the bomb shelters, We know Russia, because they will simply open fire at all the people who would be coming to the elections. And, I mean, will you be able to find the observers ready to go to the trenches and to make sure there is a transparent elections? Unfortunately, we don't have an online voting in Ukraine. Now, speaking on military, you have to understand this is the largest kind of unfairness, because the people who are protecting the rights and liberties of the citizens won't have a chance to vote. I mean, that's nonsense. Therefore, we have to think about this. We have to work on that. If everything will succeed, then we can do the elections.
Thingy, because I'm going to ask the question in French. So, all good? Skills in the Parliament, but it's going to be a bit more complex in here.
Mr. Trudeau, Canada has announced $650 additional million. That's $9 billion since the beginning of the war. We've seen resistance at Congress in the U.S. yesterday. Do you feel that there's a little bit of fatigue setting in, that it's become more difficult to convince people to continue to stand by Ukraine? And Mr. Zelensky, could I hear you on that as well? And while I'm at it, Mr. Trudeau, on India, you asked India to collaborate in the investigation. They said they haven't received anything yet. When will you provide the evidence to them? Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. First, we all understand that this is an economically difficult time. Canadians. I'll start over. We all know that we're experiencing economically difficult times around the world. Crises have multiplied. Following the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and Russia's illegal invasion, which has destabilized prices, the impact of climate change, we are facing very difficult times. That is why Canada, like other countries, is there to help our people, to help people get through these difficult times. But we understand that global challenges have global solutions. So that is why we are part of a group standing firm against Russia to defend Ukraine. We know that the destabilization of the global order that would happen if Russia succeeded in overthrowing the rules-based order would have a profound economic impact for people. That is why we are doing both things at the same time. We are there for Ukraine because it is the right thing to do for Ukrainians, but also because it is the right thing to do for Canadians. And we are there for Canadians at the same time. I understand that in all countries around the world, there are more and more complex budgetary situations. That is why we are looking at ways to directly help Ukraine with money from Russia. The Central Bank of Russia has $200 to $300 billion in assets, mainly in Europe and the United States. But today we've announced a working group to look at how we can use that money, put it to work to help Ukrainians who are suffering because of Russia. So we will continue to be innovative, to be present in standing up for Ukraine, and we will also be resolute that it is in the economic interest of Canada and even Canadians to continue to be present with everything it takes for as long as it takes so that Russia is not victorious.
Okay. We know this is a difficult time right now for all Canadians, for people around the world. The impact of climate change and extreme weather events, the hangover from the pandemic, and indeed the direct impact on food prices and energy prices linked to Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine means that people are having a hard time. And that's why we're stepping up as a country to support our citizens, but that's also why we recognize that global problems have global solutions. And we will continue to be there to ensure that Russia does not emerge victorious. Because the impact a Russian victory, which isn't just a victory over Ukraine, but would be an overthrowing of the rules-based order that has led to unprecedented prosperity and opportunity for people around the world over 75 years. If Russia were to win, Canadians in their daily lives, in their grocery bills, in the opportunities they have for the future, would be directly impacted. So we will continue to be there with as much as it takes for as long as it takes. But that's also, this financial context is why we are looking very carefully at how we can ensure that Russia itself is paying for the devastation they're causing in Ukraine. We've announced today a working group we'll look to create to see if things like Russian central bank assets, which total $200 or $300 billion in Europe and in the United States primarily, could be set to actually support Ukraine in this fight and indeed help over the long term to restore the prosperity and peace for the people of Ukraine.
Thank you for the question. I believe the Prime Minister has covered all the details for your question. I don't think I will be able to complement his answer, but some of the aspects very briefly. I believe that you're supporting either Ukraine or Russia. There's no mediators in this war. By weakening the support of Ukraine, you're reinforcing Russia. And powerful Russia, and what can you expect of it? I think the history and the historic books and the witnesses has gave all the answers necessary. That's it. If someone wants to take a risk, okay, now weaken the support to Ukrainians. But should I be absolutely frank, in case of freedom, democracy, and human rights, you need to fight for those. That's a fact. And money. Yes, we are grateful to all the countries who have been helping us with weapons, with money, and who continues to do so. But this is not the most important. The most important is that the largest price, this is something that Ukraine is paid, because we are paying with the lives of our people. So we are grateful for your support. Thank you.
j'ai l'esprit dans l'Ukraine.
I was thinking about Ukraine today, so I missed the part of the question on India. I just want to simply say that we've shared those allegations, those credible allegations, with India for weeks. We are working with our partners, and what we are asking is for India to commit constructively with Canada to establish the facts on this situation. We're there to work with them, and we have been for weeks now.
To India, Canada has shared the credible allegations that I talked about on Monday with India. We did that many weeks ago, and we are there to work constructively with India, and we hope that they engage with us so that we can get to the bottom of this very serious matter. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui conclut la conférence.
Thank you. This concludes our conference.